Why struggle through a post-merger integration when you can glide through it? Why deal with the PMI integration challenges when you can overcome them even before they occur? Why move slow when you can move at pace? What are the world's leading PMI experts doing right now to achieve profit-accelerating integrations? This podcast will give you all the answers to these questions and many more. My name is Dudley Peacock and welcome to the 100 Days and Beyond podcast. Hello and welcome everybody to the latest episode of 100 Days and Beyond. And today we got a really exciting guest, someone who has, I would say, a strong background and an interest and looks like a passion for digital and technology and so on, and intertwined that into his career over many, many years. And today we got Ashish Das. Did I pronounce that correctly, Ashish?
It's right. It's good.
Is it okay? Okay, good, great. So welcome to the show, Ashish. I just want to say, if I just quickly go onto your profile, you put yourself out there as strategy, digital and technology, business transformation, M&A, GBS, and shared services. And part of the introduction, I'd like to give us a bit of your journey. How did you get into this fascinating world? Because if I look at your career history, I mean, you've got an incredible career history, and I'd like just you to share that and just run through what does GBS mean, because we have so many acronyms flying around. For those that don't know, those from outside the your industry and that. And let's just get a background. Let's get a feel for who you are and where you come from, Ashish.
Okay. Well, thanks for that, Dudley. Thanks for that introduction. Look, like many of us, I think when we started our careers in this industry, we kind of fell into it. It was a little over 20 years ago now, when GE was trying to do some offshore work in India, and using and leveraging technology to be able to do it. We didn't think it was possible at that time. We didn't even have the right technology to be able to do it. We had big VSAT dishes sitting outside our office, and things would go down, and we'd be twiddling our thumbs for quite a while. But that turned out into this massive industry, right, in India, where the economy in India has continued to grow and leveraged a lot of the services industry that we are now with other countries is very proud of, and has been able to generate tons of employment and really have smart people in great jobs and lives. And then with that, a lot of companies, primarily, I think in the beginning from the US, started doing a lot of the offshore work, and then had companies and organizations from Europe, and then Asia as well. And then also multilateral organizations now have a lot of shared services that are outside, and people are doing work from around the world. I don't think anybody had foreseen the pandemic at that time. But the ability to leverage and use technology and be able to do work from anywhere in the world, we started doing this about 25 years ago. Over time, as organizations continue to look for efficiencies and continue to look at better and sharper across their end-to-end processes, and also leverage more and more technology, we've seen companies create what we call global business services, which are bringing together if you may, corporate centers. So finance, HR, procurement, technology, admin, all of these typically will come into a GBS officer or a GBS leader, and you start finding synergies across all of these services, across the group. And there are different flavors of how companies have done this. And, some have been super successful, and some are still starting off, and you have to work within the culture of an organization to be able to get it done. But yeah, I think it's a capability that is here to stay, and will continue to make organizations sharper, better, smarter as we continue to work in this hybrid world, if you will.
Yeah, so I mean that's a great introduction, and if I look at your CV, if you like, you really started at GE in '98. And I think if we think back to 98, I mean, we had a whole lot of new technologies. I mean, we had the advent of email. I mean, that was starting to proliferate everywhere. I mean, that was relatively new. I mean, faxes and all that were still quite prevalent. Although GE was at the forefront of a lot of technology changes. But I think if you think back from 98 to where we are today, 2022, what's that? 24 years later, you must have seen an incredible amount of change, of dealing or coping with change, and coping with especially the technology change, and you helping your colleagues, the people that report to you, helping those that you report to, etc., over your career, make sense of this changing world. And it's an ever-changing world. So I mean, just give me a sort of a sense, or give the audience a sense of how you view the world since 98 until now.
Well, yeah, as I think about this, an analogy I'd like to give, and I continue to build on that, is think of your home and think of your electrical cabinet and how you have wires to your home, and then wiring different parts of your house. Over the years, things have become so much more efficient. But when we were trying to do this, we were using, clunky systems. They're really good, mainframe systems, but they weren't really talking to each other. You had to know different screens. You had to know what every screen within that mainframe system of yours was trying to do, and really know and learn it. And then be able to run analytics. At that time, we used to run printouts and pages of data to be able to get to something. And there were questions that we wished we could ask, but knew that we could not, because of just the lack of data or the amount of data that we would have to juggle through. And I think that to me has been one of the biggest change. We are able to connect to an ecosystem outside today using technology in the cloud, that in ways that we could not previously. We can use data and ask questions that we could not previously. So I think we just have so much capability today that we did not. When I started, one of the first things we would do is look at checks that did not go through the bank. And we would get images of all of those checks and microfiche shipped to us from the US to India, and we would sit in a dark room at night, put it in a big machine and run it through that machine, and punch information out on an Excel spreadsheet and do reconciliations later at night. Yeah, I mean, today, if I have a check, I can scan it on my phone and I can deposit it and I can move on. And if you still do a check in the first place, it's just it's so different.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think I've heard the word microfiche must be in 20 years.
Oh my God, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Going back to your CV, I mean, you talk about growth and results oriented digital technology and GBS and shared services. I want to just sort of relate. I mean, the podcast is about post merger integrations. It's about integrations. It's about bringing different facets of a business or businesses together, if you like. I mean, at its core, it's when you have an M&A team going in, and I mean, let's start at the beginning. I mean, you do target selection. You select an entity to buy. You go through the process of negotiation, due diligence, etc. And as a technology person, I mean, then once the deal's signed, then there's this whole integration phase that has to happen. And you've got all these multiple technologies across different organizations, and even organizations have different geographic regions, or they have divisions, or the business is split, and they might bring in sort of they buy in an entity for a particular purpose. They might want the technology, they might want the people, They might want the geographic footprint. I mean, there's so many different reasons why acquisitions take place. But if we come back and we relate it back to your world, I mean, you talk about growth and results oriented digital technology and shared services. And shared services in my mind and the whole technology space um, can often be extremely frustrating on the one side of the continuum, for especially for users, because stuff just doesn't work and they're trying to do their jobs. And on the other side, it can be incredibly empowering and really help a lot. Um, when you talk about growth and results oriented, let's give me your flavor. What does that mean in your world with that as a backdrop in terms of remembering that we are focused on integrations and the movement forward of combining or sometimes even breaking things up, but combining and growing entities.
Great question. So, if at the end of the day, when any kind of merger or acquisition, divestiture that you're doing is for some sort of strategic purpose, which in my mind, you're either doing it for growth, um, or you're trying to find efficiencies, or you're trying to bring innovation, and at the same time, at all times, you're trying to improve your services, your offerings, and how you show up to the consumer or the customer, and trying to make things better. Um, so when you think about any such action, whether it's a merger or an acquisition or a divestiture, you really want to be, from a technology perspective, very closely linked to the business teams and understand what is what is it that we're trying to do, and what are some of the key um, uh, investments or key decisions that we must make and prioritize. Because when you're doing something like this, you could boil the ocean and try and do too much. And so I think the most important is for us to, while keep the longer term goals of growth or efficiencies or innovation in mind. In the shorter term, we have to keep the ball running. We have to integrate well and not let things draw. And we have to manage change and communication really well to get people to efficiently and effectively continue to run their day-to-day lives. Um, so you have to prioritize, and then make those decisions that will help you move forward on growth. Now, when I've been in situations where we have acquired a company, and then strategically we have said that we will continue to let them run the way things are going to be. In other places, we've said we're going to make significant changes and we're going to do it quickly. And that totally depends on the nature of the business you're acquiring, the product, the market, all the circumstances. But you just have to make sure you are lockstep in with the business teams, and you're doing absolutely what is important, and then saying no to things that will distract you from getting the results.
Yeah, I equate to use an analogy. It's sometimes adjusting or even implementing a new system or bringing changes. I mean, there's a lot of pushback from users. Sometimes users can be excited initially and then get incredibly frustrated or sometimes even angry at some of the changes, or because they just I think a user, from a point of view of they're just trying to get on with their day jobs, and if if there are bottlenecks and things that are making them have, and we talk something practical, forcing them to work late. I mean, you
Mhm.
spoke about the microfiche and the processing of checks and so on to make sure the checks go through. If that doesn't happen late at night, for instance, the next day there's no money in the bank kind of thing. It does
Mhm.
have a financial and other impact, technology and its systems. Um, coming back to the analogy, for me, it's often like driving down the motorway um, at 100 miles an hour and trying to do either an engine change or a gearbox change. I mean, these days, I suppose it's if you've got electric car, it's a battery change, electric motor change. But I think it's you're doing that while the vehicle is in motion.
Mhm.
You might even change the steering wheel and put in new seats, all while you are, driving it at a massive pace. And And it's that whole coordination. And when I look at your CV, you talk a lot um, about the fact about the teams. What I liked was when you said that you feel that you're a servant leader, and I thought that was a really good way of maybe just sort of sharing some of your philosophy around that, because I think what happens a lot is when you're in the technical space, it's very, very easy to get caught up in the technical stuff.
Mhm.
It's how do you form that bridge between technical and people? And I'd like to get your philosophy and let's call it your mantra or your blueprint, or I don't know, whatever you want to call it. Tell us a bit about that.
A friend of mine said it once, and I think he said, you got to, you got to listen, you got to learn, and you got to love, or not to love some of the things that will make things successful or what people like. And so I think that listen, to learn, and to love, what is really good and would make a difference in your programs and projects is very, very critical. Um, one of in you know we in one of the acquisitions that we integrated, we did it in a very difficult market, one of the world's most difficult markets to run an SAP implementation, and did a really good job. I think the teams worked considerably hard. And when we went live, there were things that we learned at that time which we did not know. And like you said, it is like changing the wheels on a bus that's running. We started getting operational impact, and that was not cool. But we do learn from our mistakes. And the next time around that we went in and had another significant implementation in a different country, massive, the culture was different, the language was different, and we had learned from the previous implementations. We sat down with the teams and we actually got people in a room, and we had everyone talk about where they came from, what was most important to them. And, what does 4 p.m. mean for you? I'm going to have a cup of tea. Well, what does that mean? And, what is somebody else going to do at that time? And it was really interesting for people to come together and really talk about their shared experiences of their culture and how people get around to understanding each other and really talking about things that are important. And some countries don't. It's just the culture is different and you have to approach it differently. We started this other program with that as a base. And then we also spoke to our business leaders and had a conversation with them about what success meant to them. It was a big SAP implementation, and the typical, project metrics of being on time, on target, on cost, were important. But the business leader, had an ask of us, and the ask was, do not mess my business up. For a lot going on right now. And we had to go back and say, well, we're going to shut down some of the lines, and we're going to have to come back up after a while. And while we plan everything, something will go wrong. And so while there will not be zero disruption, can we agree on what an unplanned disruption would look like? And so we put a definition in for disruption, and then we said if anything went out, that was the unplanned disruption. We agreed to no unplanned disruption. But then we spent a lot of time defining what planned disruption was. And then we went back in and worked that in with our finance teams. And we also prepared to say we had to go out on the street and let them know if there would be any material disruption, we would disclose that. Wasn't going to be a lot eventually. But long story short, I think you really need to talk to your people to understand the cultural differences. You need to understand what makes people work, and you need to really define what success will be, and then put some guardrails around that. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, and I think it's just making me think that even you almost have to go down to the fundamentals of what words mean. What do I mean when I say, having a dictionary of words as I mean this if I say that.
That's right. So,
And I think people don't realize that to what sort of level you have to do that, especially when you're in a multicultural environment.
mhm,
I was involved many years ago with one where I think Price Waterhouse did some work with Unilever, and there was a whole integration with the HR department, and there was a consolidation of all the HR um, sort of offices across multiple factories, across multiple countries, across multiple product lines, and so on and so on, and jurisdictions and laws. And I mean, you just take it. I mean, it just,
mhm,
if you think just in the HR space, that in itself is a nightmare. And if you come back to technology, a lot of the technology runs the payroll, will do the pay slips, will do the calculations on the on the on the pay slips and so on. And people very quickly, if they either get paid late or paid incorrectly, you could have queues outside your door and people having conversations and consuming a lot of the project time just dealing with queries from users. So coming back to the M&A side of things, what was very interesting in your CV, Ashish, you talk about breadth of understanding in emerging and core digital and technology solutions across, and this is now very interesting because it's marketing, sales, supply chain, R&D, and obviously the corporate function. So it's a cross
mhm.
function environment. So you would have, tell me a bit about the experiences and the time, and or just like we've got cultures within the cultures in organizations, you also have employee types, if you like. Salespeople generally are different to marketing people, are different to finance people, are different to operations people, are different to distribution and so on and so tell us a bit about your experience around that. I mean, when you going into an M&A and you're going into it in post-merger integration, especially on the technology side, but with that people element. Tell us a bit about your experience there. Maybe pull up a case study, or maybe or just give us your view on that.
Yeah, no, look, at the end of the day, you find that most of the teams that people are trying to really be super successful in what they're trying to do. The sales and marketing teams usually have their own uh, pressures and they want results really quickly. They're out in front of the customer. They're the guys who are bringing the money in, and they're usually very demanding. And of course, the finance guys, very focused on controls. Want to make sure that we've got the right numbers going through the books, and we can add them all up. I think when we're doing a large integration like this, we have to be able to um, prioritize, and I think we spoke a little bit about that earlier. We have to be able to say what is most important. So in one of the acquisition integrations that we did, it was across the spectrum, where we had to do legal entity changes, move people from one legal entity to another. We had to integrate the factories of the production and planning systems. We had to integrate our sales systems, our trade and promotion systems, and all of that into our SAP. Um, we 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 had a choice to go big bang and do everything at the same time, but the change management around that would have been significant. From a technology perspective, we would have pulled up our socks and said, "Yep, we can do it." But as we went through the entire change management, we said integrating everything and giving the employee on the shop floor a completely new experience tomorrow morning is a significant change, and it adds to the complexity that we don't need. Now, we went back and said we would integrate parts, and then there are others that we would stitch together and let people work the way they're going to work right now, and have all the numbers and metrics come out the way we want them to. That caused us, more pain, stitching together and putting, bespoke solutions in place that we would work around with, and then try and figure out what happened in system A and why did that not flow through system B. It was more painful, but it was helpful from a change management perspective on the floor. on the shop floor and the sales teams to actually get it moving and not change their life too much on day one. Um, we had to quickly follow through though. Yeah. So we had to have a quick follow through plan to say, okay, now that we've got the core done, here's the other things that we need to get done and move on. So it is a journey, right? And as long as you can plan the 12, 18 months out and say, here's what you're going to get done, people will understand the prioritization. People will understand when they will get the tools and systems they need. And then we need to work around that. And I think that change management and communication is critical as you work through teams.
Yeah, I mean, I share that. Yeah, I've been in the technology space for probably the best part of 27 years, and I've got to say, for me, I don't know where I heard it somewhere. It's not something that I made up, but there's this mentality of I've got to work around. I don't know if you ever heard that word. I've got to work around. Yeah. So yeah, I've got a bottleneck of this is not working, but you know what? I've got to work around, and there are 12 extra steps that you wouldn't have had to do before, but let's just do this as a workaround. And then it leads on to what I say is there's nothing more permanent than a temporary solution. And often what happens in technology is we do a quick workaround or we do a quick stitch together. And it's almost like this thing that's going to go wrong sometime in the future, but users don't understand the implications. And maybe just let's delve into that, because when you're going into an M&A, and you're looking and you're investigating, and when you're looking at due diligence, let's say at the pre-deal side, now you're going into the post-deal integration. Okay, so those are two scenarios. So if I go in and I do a due diligence and just, I mean, tell us a bit about your due diligence process around the IT and so on, and shared services. I mean, shared services as a concept, maybe just for the benefit of the audience, just let's start there. Just define what is shared services. What does that actually mean in the bigger picture?
Well, your ability to centralize and standardize a lot of your processes and be able to run it from a dedicated team. Most of your downstream processes that can be done from a centralized team and then automated is what a shared service is really trying to do. Freeing up people on the more upstream to be able to do the more analytical and customer or consumer touch work. So you could do this for HR, for example. Payroll is one that we spoke about, but you can take payroll, you can take learning, and you could take you could take recruitment, you could take onboarding, in the entire hire to retire cycle, and put that in a shared services. And run that from a centralized team, begin to standardize your processes around the globe, apply technology and automation. Yeah. That leaves your HR generalists to be working with the business teams on employee development, right? And talent planning and all the other strategic requirements of the team. You do the same thing in sales, you do the same thing in marketing, where we've taken out a lot of the content creation work, for example, for marketeers, and put that in shared services, and freeing up a lot of time for the team marketeers. We've taken work out for writing pitches, for example, or managing websites, for managing product information management. You can take a lot of that out and put that in a centralized place, and really begin to develop that as a capability that lets an organization manage through cycles. And every organization or every industry has a different life cycle of growth, and then some the growth tapers off at some point, and you've got to consolidate and find efficiencies. And so working through that pendulum of growth and finding efficiencies, a shared services sits right in the middle and allows an organization to go through that switch and change, if done effectively, without having to completely restructure and reorganize every time you go through that.
Yeah, I love that because my coming back to the question, then I mean shared services. If we talk about in a post merger or a post acquisition integration, and I'm coming back to the start of my question, is that when we're looking at acquiring an entity and we're doing due diligence and we're having a look at the entity, we go in as an M&A team and we'd say, okay, when we acquire that entity, it looks as if, and a part of our sort of, let's call it sort of fundamental things we're trying to do are value creation,
Mhm.
synergy capture, all those fancy sort of terms. And we're trying to then, from the off the back of that, depending on the strategic outcome we're looking for, bringing together a shared service might be something that the target company doesn't already have, or you might already have a shared service that then you could bring them in. Or the third option is you're now getting into a situation where by acquiring the entity, you now need a shared service.
Mhm.
Um, so there are different scenarios that play out, and I want to just get your sense of that because for those of the within the audience that are saying, okay, what is it that IT actually do in an M&A in a post merger or post acquisition process to integrate and to bring out value and to not just be another cost, because sometimes the view could be, you know what, we got five systems, and when we let's say consolidate or buy those four or five entities, we could strip out all those license fees. We could strip out all the extra, peripheral software that's probably not being maximized or being used. There's already $100 million worth of savings. We could just by doing that. Okay. So
Mhm.
that's on the money side. And then all of a sudden you start looking at the people side, and then the business side and the operational side. And I think I love your thing where the guy in when you went to start the project and he said, just don't mess my business up.
Yeah.
And often, clunky as they may be, sometimes the software is so core to a particular entity. So when you're going in as pre-deal and you're doing a due diligence, theoretically you're going to say, oh well, I can just pluck that, I can consolidate those licenses. I mean, SAP is a great example of it doesn't matter if you got SAP in this division, that division, whatever, or that entity and the target entity. SAP, as an example, is so customized often that when you go in and you actually purchase the entity, they might have SAP licenses, but the way that they've implemented the system is so entirely different that there's no ways these two SAP systems can talk to each other. I mean, that goes across to any ERP or any kind of system, that you might have the same identical license fee,
Mhm.
but the way that the software has been implemented, because there's intellectual property, there's process, there's system, workflows, that sort of thing being built in. Give us your experience. I mean, I want to get a flavor of some of this. I've painted a bit of a picture. I'd love to hear your experience on that.
No, I mean, you've done a great job already painting, talking about what we would do. And I don't know if I can add a lot more value to that, but if I was to just summarize that, I think what we're really trying to do is, of course, look at the cost side of it, right? You're looking at the technology, you're looking at the shared services capabilities, and you are saying, yep, we can put all of our payroll into into our shared services. Or if you don't have a shared service already, then you suddenly begin to realize you have, let's say, plant accounting done in all of our plants, and then suddenly you have, too many plant accounting cost accountants, and you don't need all of that, and you can begin to find synergy. So we will look at those shared services and the technical architecture, but essentially what you're looking at, block one is to figure out those cost efficiencies across people, process, technology, licenses, and everything else. The second thing is, of course, you are trying to look at how the business will actually run, and what is the organization going to be, and who's going to be making decisions. And then does your technology and your shared services capabilities support that today, or do you need to redesign something? And we, from a technology perspective, we do need to have serious conversations with business where they're making some assumptions around here's what we're going to do, and here's how, the orders are going to come in, and here's, how it's going to flow. Well, truly, it may or may not work. And, here are the things that we need to do. And we need our business analysts to really come in and pitch in and say, here's how we've designed the systems, and here are the constraints. They usually know much more operationally. And we find that the business analysts really have a depth of knowledge that must be considered. And we have to take that and elevate that conversation back to the guys who are making the decisions on the business and how things are going to run. So designing that process and getting the right subject matter experts and elevating that voice up into the assumptions being made is critical to success. And the third is making sure you have the right people assigned. With so much that's going on, we may not have the right people work on it, and but they will be off doing something else. So then again, you've got to make those trade-offs. So again, within that M&A pre-deal, you go and try to understand what the blueprint is and what you're going to need, and get some of the right people to come in and have a conversation and look at systems and say, is this truly going to work? One of the examples, we were going to use APO for our planning system, and we'd gone in with that assumption saying, yep, we're going to run with it. And then we had two of the guys come in and look at the system and say, here's the functionality that the users are currently used to. And we bring in our APO system. How's it going to work? And they came back and said, yeah, it can. It needs 25 different enhancements plus A, B, and C. And we were like, there's no way we can get 25 different enhancements to match the functionality of what is already there. Just leave it. Leave it for now, right? And then we figure out what we do. But 25 significant enhancements to the way we get designed the system to be able to match the other functionality. It's just a recipe for disaster. So you've got to have that people process technology conversation pre-deal and get the right people engaged and elevate, their knowledge and their recommendations.
I'm just writing it down because I think people, process, technology. I mean, those are the three sort of almost pillars, aren't they? People, process, technology, and it's they intertwined because people still have to use the systems. I mean, the system's not going to use themselves. You could have the best system in the world, but it can't use itself. So you need people. You need process because you need the actual the procedures, the workflows, the business model, if you like, because often a lot of the intellectual property has been captured within an IT system. A lot of the learnings and let's call it the acquisition, the asset value, if you like. And I think I had a conversation recently with on another episode with an expert in the e-commerce space that was saying how do you value a digital asset? How do you value an asset that's let's call it an e-commerce store? It's literally just some code, isn't it? I mean, you got people going on there and they're doing transactions. You got a few payment gateways, etc. I think from a valuation point of view, and I want to throw this in as a bit of a curveball, Ashish, is do you think overall that when you go in and you're looking at the value of a business, you can go and do, from a finance point of view, we can do discounted cash flow analysis, and you can debate about the WACC or the WACC, the weighted average cost of capital. You could debate about the value of the assets, the buildings, the machines, the equipment, and etc. But what's difficult to value, and in terms of a business model, give me your view. I mean, for me, I think the intellectual property and let's call it, and let's say there's a business that you're acquiring that's been around for a little while. You've got intellectual property built into the systems. It's an asset value question for me. You may not have ever looked at it this way, but I'm gonna use this as a curveball and see how you explain it, because I think often there's a difficulty in valuing what's built in as IP in a system. So tell me a little bit about your view on that.
It's a tough one. And typically the way you look at it really is not just about what's the IP in the system. You're really talking about the data that is sitting in there, and the connections that you have with your data, your systems back to your channels and your ability to do business. Um, I think it shows up in your P&L in terms of just how efficient, your profit and loss statement is. Um, that's really where you value that. I don't know if you put a value on what's the quality of the IPs or the data sitting inside of your systems. Um, it's one of the things that you are doing pre-deal is trying to understand that and just how difficult or it is going to be for you to manage that data. But we always, I don't think we value that at all. So it is a curveball question.
It is a serious curveball. It's the same
Yeah.
question as a talent question, because
Yeah.
if you're looking at people, you say, oh, that person A or that person B, person C, they're key individuals, they're key talent.
Yeah. That we can identify.
That you can identify.
Yeah.
But how do you identify the actual value? And I think what you did touch on, which I think is a really, very, really, really good point, is the amount of data. Now,
Yeah.
often there's a lot of data that's not being used or maximized or really put to work, that's been accumulated in IT systems. Sometimes it's difficult to extract, but often there's a significant value. So when you go into an entity, you start looking at valuations and so on, and
Yeah.
when you're looking at integrations, you start saying, okay, the data, what can we extract? Because remember, what the core issues around integration really are, that we kind of trying to answer the question: how can we capture value? How do we get or value create? How do we capture the synergies? How do we make this entity worth more than when we first acquired it? I mean, those are often questions that I get asked. Give me again, it's sort of a semi curveball, but this one's probably going to be a little less curvy than the previous one.
Yeah, look, you are really, you are looking at what's the data, what is the state of the technology platforms. You're really assessing the cost of integrating that into your organization. And sometimes, there may be something very cool that you can bring in. But typically there's a cost to doing all of this, and you have to be able to cost it out and be able to say, here's the capability that we can build, and working back in tandem with business teams to say, for example, if you're a brick and mortar retail business and you acquire something which has e-commerce capabilities, you're bringing a platform on that you can then scale and leverage across your other brands and products, and that's a great acquisition, and you can build value that platform. Um, how good the data is within that, what is the intellectual capital behind that? Um, I don't know. There's a little bit of goodwill. There's a little bit of, what's the transactions that are really going on right now? How robust is it? And, what does it cost things up? What is the future of this platform? What will be, what technologies are built on? How do we scale this up tomorrow? I think you start building a lot of those assumptions into that to be able to go back and put value around that. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that's well answered, and I mean, I think the just the throwing out the curveballs. From an experienced guy, I think just the answers and even the way that you've answered it, I think highlights to the audience the complexities out there. I mean, it is not as simple. A
Yeah,
post-merger integration or even just looking at an acquisition is not as simple as sticking two parts together. there are so many layers that you have to peel away, pretty much like an onion. But to use a cliche, but I think that's really the essence of what you've mentioned, and that's why I'm throwing the curveball, because I think it's important from a guy like yourself. I mean, you got an incredible experience. You got such an amazing a CV or resume. Um, from 1998 until 2022, you've been in the tech space. You've been in the M&A merger acquisition space. You've led teams. You've been direct. I mean, you've managed some serious environments, and it is complex. And it's never the same when you go from one to the next. Although some of the principles remain the same. But I think you said, what was it? People, process, and system. So people, process, and technology. That's right. That's what you were saying. The three sort of pillars that are key. I'm loving that, and I think that just highlights, I think, the complexity, because there's no one size fits all.
There
I
is.
want to, yeah, I want to just change gears a little bit and say, okay, look, you've had this career that's seen mainframes. I mean, that was the old cloud. If you think about, that's the sort of the first technology around cloud. You had the thin clients, if you remember those days, where you had uh, no memory, nothing within the terminals, and everything was in the mainframes, and then it went back down to PC level, and now we're doing cloud, which is pretty much the same thing. It's just gone full circle. It's just the concept staying the same. The execution is slightly different. But where I see the biggest change, and why I'm bringing this up, because you've worked across sales, marketing, operations, et cetera, et cetera. You worked across, as shared services, you work across so many different operational areas. What's busy happening now, in my view, across many organizations, is there's a shifting landscape. There's a shifting market. Consumers or customers are buying differently, demand different things, are demanding a different type of delivery or different type of service. The way that things are going, the brick and mortar businesses, I mean, if we go mainframe style, IBM, those big buildings that they used to house computer technology, now everything's in these big data warehouses where you don't even know where they are, in terms of cloud. How do you deal with this trans transition from sort of old technology into an online world, if you like? Um, how have you dealt with it? What's your view on all these changes, and uh, and the shift that's busy happening? Give us your view on that.
Yeah, it's a broad question. So the shift is evident to all of us, yeah, and we are all, not just in the technology or shared services professionals trying to make the change, but we're also consumers and users of that, and we also are changing just the way we consume data, we consume services, and our expectations are different. So I think we're all living that change, and as we go through this, there's the core project part of the organization where you have to go back in and look at your infrastructure or your technology stacks, and you have to modernize all of that. So there is a component of modernizing all of your technology to be more contemporary to the new ways of consuming data or running, analytics and reaching out to the consumer. But maybe it's a very complex project or a program of projects that needs to be managed very carefully and well aligned with the business case, because that is a significant cost to the organization to upgrade your chassis, if you will, to something that's going to be fit for the future. Um, in some cases, you might decide to build a completely new chassis and say, we're not going to retrofit back with the old one. Totally depends on what the organization is. Um, the other part of your question is, how do I see this change and where is it all going? Definitely don't have a place, right? But um, there are some things that are still going to be there. I mean, if you think about gaming, you still have consoles. Um, will the consoles completely go away? Perhaps not. But could you start using your TVs as a console as well tomorrow? You could. And I think there is that convergence of these technologies and devices that we will continue to see. Um, and with more and more data and analytics, our ability to offer services and products that are sharper and better and more personalized, I think that will continue to get better and better. And as we invest in our analytics capabilities, our logistics, supply chains, planning systems, our ability to do that, um, at least at the conceptual and theoretical level with the data and information, will continue to get much better. We do have a few curveballs that keep coming at us, COVID or the situation with Ukraine right now, which completely upset our supply chains. And I think, as we get more data and information and, hopefully all this resolves well, and soon we will be able to just get much sharper and better. You know, uh, it's fantastic to be in the middle of this transition. When I talk to my kids, I tell them you set a folder, you have to stick your finger in and rotate to get to a number. And they're not going to memorize all those numbers. They're not seeing that. But we've gone through that to other mobile phones to be able to do everything shop on your phones. We've seen a lot of transition. And I think you continue to see.
Yeah, no. These days it's, hey Alexa.
You just talk to
Yeah.
the computer. You talk to your computer. You talk to your car. So yeah, I mean, it's just it's fantastic. It's things that I think we spoke about. It's a little in the questions that you didn't think you could ask because you didn't think you had enough data or you had too much data. It's for someone like me when I'm in the car, I'm thinking, and I want to be able to talk to my car and say, hey, here's some notes and reminders, and here's what I want to do. Okay, you call person A or B. The call person A or B works. The other things, still getting there. But there's so much more that we can do.
Yeah. I think there's a book called something about the second brain or something like that, where you have your thinking creative, sort of the planning strategy brain. And then your thinking, your second brain is the one that must do all the processing stuff. And it's how do you get technology to be your second brain, where you can just do the stuff that you love doing, do the stuff that is really where you can add most value to the world, uh, and spend most of your time in that space and less time in the actual, let's call it the sandpit, and filling a bucket of sand, and just emptying it over there, kind of thing. All those mundane things that are not necessarily moving you forward.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we're investing in technologies using machine learning and AI, where a business leader can just type in a question and say, "Hey, what does my share look like today?" Now you spoke about this a little earlier, saying, "Well, what does share look like today?" Every word means something, and share of brand or category includes A versus B, and just being really clear about what the data set and the definition is. But we're working on a lot of that today to say a business leader should not be spending a lot of time going through pages of reports or multiple automated Tableau dashboards, let's say, but there's still a lot of them. But can you get to a point where you can just say, Alexa, what does my share look like in front of today? What category B? And what happened? Right. And you should be able to throw that information out. There's enough out there today that gets very close to it. And, I think, we continue to get better at it as we work through our data, as we work through our definitions, as we work through the ability of the algorithms to be able to recognize those questions and get sharper. So a lot of good work happening there.
I think this is my last question. I want to ask you one or two personal questions because we coming to around 5 minutes before the end, and um, I want to, I think the part of a business when there's a carve out or divestiture, that would probably be one of the ones that experience probably some of the most stress, is the shared service, or even the the guys that manage the IT infrastructure. So when we look at that sort of carve out or divestiture, it's not as there's no simple line that you could draw down the middle and say, okay, well, you take those 100 customers and I'll take these 100 customers, and you take those 3 licenses and I'll take these 3 licenses. And it's not as simple as that. Just give us your experience around the difference between an actual acquisition where you're integrating systems, and what's the difference between separating businesses.
Two very different animals, right? Uh, with the acquisition, when you're integrating, you feel at least you have much more control about what you can do, and if you push things out or you can get things done now. And uh, the issue there is you don't know what you don't know, and you can only know how much you understood through the process of due diligence. You end up finding different things later, and you continue to work through that integration to to uh, to make things work and realize the value that you wanted to. With the divestiture, you think you know. It's your organization. You can put a lot of people together, but then you realize that an organization is a living entity, and it grows. And there's different things that happen inside the organization over time that may have been documented, may be available, or you don't know, and you start uncovering a lot of things, and you have to go through that conversation of who gets what and how you run it. It's a very, very, very structured, very detailed, very painful project plan that you have to go through. You have to be very open in communications and manage that change really well. And you're talking to very different parts of the organization, from HR to sourcing to legal to the business teams, and really try to stitch all of it together and doing it quickly and rapidly. When you're doing a carve out, it becomes so much more difficult. It's just a divestiture. And if you try to just move a brand out, sometimes the financial reporting of some of this is so intertwined across categories, markets. You really need the subject matter experts to be able to dive deep in and be able to say, like, here's what's happening to your data, the reports, the information, and here's how we can redesign all of this. So there's a it's 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 yeah, it's like when you unpacking is so much more difficult because there's just so much out there.
Ashish, thank you very much. And I think it's a view, for me. This episode has been a view into the world of the complexities of the IT sort of domain, that they're really, I think most people that don't live it, they say someone in IT can fix it. And they don't necessarily realize what needs to happen to keep the system going, and to keep the actual IT processor systems talking to each other, reporting. It's not just a press of a button. There are human beings out there that are sweating to make sure that the system works, continues working, and is continuously updated, upgraded. I mean, we haven't even touched on things like documentation, on things like change in documents. How do you keep a record of a change? If a business manager said, look, I want to adjust or amend a particular process, and then you go and do it, and then 3 years later, someone comes back and says, but why did you do it like this? Somewhere someone needed to keep a record of it. I mean, it's just the minefield is massive. So just before we end, I mean, do you want to quickly comment on that?
No, what you said is true. And what happens is the business analyst sitting in IT is the one who really knows what happened. And the documents may not exist. And so you have to go back always to some of the business analysts and say, so why did we wire it like the way we did right now? Or can you tell me exactly how this is working and where is it flowing? And I think, what does happen is that some of the business analysts there in the IT teams really become the holders of institutional knowledge. We spoke about knowledge in the systems, but really it is these analysts who really know what has been configured, why, and what is where. Really critical part of any change that we do.
Yeah, and they're almost the unsung heroes of shared services business. Um, Thank you very much, Ashish. I want to just come onto your personal life, just briefly, if you don't mind. How do you keep sane in this crazy world? How do you keep healthy? How do you maintain? I don't know whether there is such a thing as work-life balance, but how do you maintain some level of just sanity in terms of a world that's constantly changing, and also make sure that you're still living your life and enjoying it and so on. Just share with us some of those things you do in your personal side.
Well, I think, we're all trying. I think one of the research studies at the university at Harvard really says that your quality of life and your mental health really depends on, just how connected you are to your families and to your communities and friends. And just having I'm blessed and unfortunate, and I hope that a lot more as well. And you continue to just spend time with the people you love, and whether it's at home with your friends and uh, colleagues, staying connected, listen, learn, and figure out what you love about each conversation that you meet with. And I think that just keeps you energized and keep going.
I love that. I had someone, not in one of the episodes, but one of my dear clients mentioned, he says, life's made up of memories.
Yeah.
And you want to create as many memories, good memories, that is with your family, your friends, and even at work. But you want to make up a lifetime of good memories, and I think that's basically what we remember are the significant moments or shared moments that we have. Ashish, thank you very, very much. That's been absolutely fascinating. You're a brilliant guest. I think just from a technology perspective, the audience today has got a view on, I think, a professional that is that has had a fair share of experience since 1998. I mean, it's 24 years in the technology space. Thank you very much, Ashish. I wish you all the best, and I certainly hope that you'll come back onto the show at some stage in the future, as you shift and change and new things happen, because technology seriously doesn't stand still. The fundamentals stand still, but things do change. But thank you very much. I appreciate. Thank you for dealing with my curveballs, uh, and yeah, I really do appreciate it.
No, thanks, Dudley. Enjoy the conversation and the curveballs. Good to think through and continue to think through some of these issues. But yeah, again, thanks so much.
No, thank you, and I certainly hope that the audience enjoyed that. If you need to know anything about Ashish, do you have any way that people can contact you? How are you contactable?
Well, LinkedIn works. Reach out to me on LinkedIn, or you can always on my email and my phone number, so I'll update it on that. So I'm happy to connect through that.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Have a fantastic day. I know it's busy, and all the best, and we'll catch up with you again soon. Thank you, Ashish.
Cheers, Dudley.
Hi, everybody. This is Dudley again, and if you need help with a future or existing post-merger integration, I want to invite you to arrange a free, no obligation meeting with us. During the meeting, we'll find out exactly what you need, what your challenges are, and we'll explain how our unique PMI slipstream method can help you. Simply call us or visit mergerintegration.co.uk. That's mergerintegration.co.uk, or come to our website, skillfulpursuit.com.